Welcome, everybody, to BlockHeads in March of 2026. My name is Dan Mirsch, one of the BlockHeads. Excited to show you a few things today related to meat models, obviously the chef hat and the apron. We're going to be doing a little cooking today, but I'm going to hand it off to Judy Lin, who is really the arbiter and the initiator of this whole process, and her journey to how we've been able to make these models a great training model. It's sustainable, and we're able to do it relatively cheaply, very much compared to cadaver courses. So I'm going to hand it off to Judy.
All right, thanks, Dan. Like Dan mentioned, I think all of you are here because you're also fellow meat model makers or educators and interested in trying to make these models to help with nerve block education or other ultrasound procedures. Back in 2018 and 2019, I was experimenting with yeah, fellow meatheads. Um, Experimenting with just pork loin and trying to see if we could stick bunches of pork loin together to create a fascial plane. And then we also kind of found ways to mimic nerves and blood vessels. So I'm just doing a little intro because some of the components Dan has used to develop his more highly evolved meat model. So, one thing that I can share. So the first is, oh, let me see if Dan, would you be able to allow me to share? The first thing is the nerves. So we found that if we saturated yarn with gel, that it would create a hyperechoic appearance. And with a little bit of shadowing, but not to the extent that I think like people have used like dried spaghetti or different types of like um, obviously like fluid is going to be anechoic, so it's kind of hard to mimic the nerve. So I can share a picture of looks like it's still disabled. Um, So the nice thing about nerves, about yarn, is you can make the nerve as big and as small as you want. So I used a
Judy, you
fluffier.
Judy, you can share screen now.
Oh, I can. Okay, let me see. Thank you. All right, so this is an example of like a peripheral nerve between two pieces of meat, and you could see it's hyperechoic, a little bit of shadowing, but not too much. And it's nice because you can make it as big and as small as you want. We use this kind of a fluffier type of yarn, like a woolly yarn. And let me see if there's a picture over here. Because I found just the regular yarn was a little bit too thin. So you can actually make it bigger by braiding it. The nice thing about this is I've made a popliteal sciatic model where you could actually, see the nerve. You can make it bifurcate. So you can have like a single nerve bifurcate into two nerves. So it's really versatile. And super easy. Just soak it, really get it soaked with gel. So that's really nice. The other component is blood vessels, where you could take different size straws to mimic vessels. So the large vessels, we use a boba straw and we put gel in it, just taking care to not introduce any air in it. So you'll probably need to use the squeeze bottle because the gel packets tend to have a lot of air mixed in it and it's hard to get out. I initially used gum on the side, but actually for Dan's model, because the gel's pretty sticky, it doesn't leak out. So it's nice. You could just put the gel in and it kind of stays there. And then it kind of mimics a blood vessel. And so the other thing that we're not using for Dan's model, but I just thought I'd mention is meat glue. So meat glue is an enzyme that binds proteins together. And so it helped to kind of bind our models together. And Dan kind of solved that issue by putting everything kind of in a container. But that's kind of what we use to bind things together. And when we used two pieces of meat that had fascia already on it and put meat glue between those two fascial layers, we were able to get some hydrodissection. So here's a video of that. You can kind of see, but this is hard to replicate. You have to find meat that has a thick layer of fascia. Most of the time you go to the grocery store, they've removed that layer. And so you'll have like a thin layer. So this was just it was hard. It was hard to get you know, a model that reliably had hydrodissection. But that's it. Yeah. And you know, time goes on and people innovate, and I'll hand it over to Dan now.
Thank you very much. So, in the spirit of kind of treating this like a cooking show, I'm going to show you a few of our models. So, can everyone see the screen with yeah, here we go. I'm gonna just
Before you go on, Dan, can I just ask a couple questions to Judy? So, um, why are these models? So I'm gonna play devil's advocate in the room just because I think it's good to have that. So I'm gonna say that we have companies that make gel blocks, or we have just a simple gel block trainer. And if the goal is to task my residents or learners, which I think is important, I think having simulation, I don't think it has to be, Mark Zuckerberg simulation, because I think that's stupid, but some level of lo-fi simulation that allows it to happen. Why do I need to make these meat models? And just from the work wise.
Yeah, I think that replication of sonoanatomy is super important. Where the needle is going to end up, where that target plane is, and sort of the needle approach. In addition to like other external anatomies, so you have like an artery there where you shouldn't go through, or you have like another muscle there that identifies where the fascial plane is. So um, our learners were able to um, just feel more comfortable with practicing both sonoanatomy and in-plane technique. And they were able to, I had another video, but because there was a separation because there's muscle and fascial plane, when they were not in the right plane, they would inject into the muscle. So they were differentiating between an intramuscular injection and a fascial injection. And there's definitely that's, I think, the crux of these specific skills that get you to be good at this procedure. And those phantom models, they're just um, basically just like a hard gel, and then maybe they have a hyperechoic nerve in it, but there are no fascial planes, there's no sonoanatomy. You can't build like a peng block. We have so many different blocks. You can't mix and match to
Yeah.
replicate the sonoanatomy, and they're very expensive. Um,
So
and
one is price, two is ease of use, as in build various blocks, and three, it's the real need for, I think, learners to one be able to navigate the needle, visualize. I had a learner. I was doing a block yesterday. My learner was off axis, and so I had to kind of maneuver his probe to be. So I think those little micro skills. I hate those terms because they sound so like overplayed, but those subtle skills that you can't learn from a textbook, I think what you're saying, and that's why I think this is a really useful tool. I said that as a rhetorical question in some ways, but I agree with you. I think this is the only way to get the learner from I'm going to be from my website to actually getting it to practice. And those little subtle skills are so valuable. It's really hard to teach those, and I think this is the bridge to scale the product.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I agree with.
I'll hope it's okay to hop in.
Yeah, go ahead.
I guess agree that I have to say that one of the experiences I've had personally in the sim lab with simulators and phantoms that are just uniform and don't really replicate what tissue is like, it's not an environment that is conducive to really teaching. I think maybe to your point, as you were supervising someone yesterday, someone gets used to stabbing a blue phantom and it's this homogeneous bleh, and then they're in tissue for the first time and are completely disoriented and almost overwhelmed by the fact that there's so much other stuff to see as they're trying to do needle visualization. And I think to the point of expense, my experience has been with programs that the first question is we can't afford these. They're out of our budget range, and the concept of being able to make something that's relatively affordable, it's probably a better teaching tool and and more accurate for our learners to become cognitively more confident in their ability, in their skill set is really profound. So thanks for doing this as well, but I second that.
Yeah.
This is a great jump from Blue Phantoms. How's that?
Yeah, I think that the Blue Phantom provides a good initial needle skills, but this is a scaffolded program where you go from Blue Phantom or whatever, brand gel-based simulator to this or, some other more higher fidelity, and then you do a patient. And so you get that staged scaffolded learning process of needle tracking going forward. Okay, so I would like to show you guys how to build your own ping model. So what you're going to need is one of these containers that you can get them online. They're usually phrased on Amazon as like a macaron container, like a cookie container, and you can get about 100 of them for about I think $18 or $10, something between like 10 and $18. You can get 100 of these. So they're super cheap. For your primary meat, I do like using the boneless pork chop or boneless pork sirloin for this process. These were actually on sale, and they have a really great fascial plane right in the middle that might also work later in this video for a transgluteal sciatic. So we'll find out. One of the things you can't container. Sorry, can you guys see the screen that I'm referencing? Okay.
Hey Dan, it's not obvious. I was gonna say if you want to switch those screens, it'll be much easier for the person who is looking at this either on a phone or because when you talk, it comes into your voice space.
Mm,
Do you understand how Zoom? So I think
okay.
if you turned off your voice and allowed the voice off of the other one, then that would enlarge. There you go.
How's this?
Much better.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, so this is a boneless pork chop or boneless pork sirloin. Again, it has this middle portion here that might be able to work as a transgluteal sciatic, but the main point is that it's a larger piece that we can cut other things into. So I've already cut these to size just to make sure that this has less overlay. You always want to make sure that the overhang is as minimal as possible. To create the appearance of an anterior inferior iliac spine, because we're going to do a ping block right now. To do that, I like to just use the piece of the container that the meat actually comes in. So this is actually just a piece of the styrofoam that this product came in. And I think that saves a lot of cost as well. And what we're going to try and do is recreate this appearance. So we're going to try and have that lump here into the psoas tendon and off to the side. So the psoas tendon, we're going to use that string that we talked about earlier. This is an example of what that yarn looks like that Judy had mentioned. And I've been soaking it in water for a little while so that it makes sure that it has the appropriate appearance. If it has too much air in it, it just looks like a little cloud with nothing behind it. So we're going to create that. So I'm going to put this into my container, thusly, and then I'm going to take my meat model or my slice here. I'm going to cut a piece on the side here, and I'm going to take a boba straw that I've cut to size. So usually this is what I give my 7-year-old to do is I'll have the little strike marks and I'll have him cut these a whole bunch of these so I can make a whole bunch of them at once. I'll take the gel, and the nice thing about these gel bottles is that you can kind of push gel straight into the straw and fill it with that gel. And this is actually what creates the appearance of a vessel. So I'm just going to slide that guy right in here. It does sometimes behoove you to just put a little bit of extra gel on the inside so it has good contact. And then we're just going to slide this into our cartridge or our box or whatever you want to call it. And so now we should have something that looks vaguely like a peng block. So let's take a look. All right. All right, so you guys can see on the screen there, this is what we just built. That we have our appearance of the AIS, the anterior inferior iliac spine here. And then we have what looks like a psoas tendon right here. So if I were to actually perform this block, I'm going to just flip it around because I'm right-handed. There's my AIIS over there. I'm going to use a relatively hefty syringe here. You can see there's my needle. And here's a first fascial plane. So I'll just show you a picture of what kind of like an initial injection looks like. So that's all inside the muscle. So that's not great for this particular block. But I can get closer to that psoas tendon, get down to the surface, and then you can see that that change of the tissue textures and that lifting of the meat. It's a little on the subtle side for this particular block because it's leaking out over the sides, but you can at least get your sonoanatomy there, and then you can get your false passage or your false injection look appearance if you're not in the right place. So that's your first kind of relatively easy model to build. Next, I'm going to show you one of the other workhorses. Any questions so far?
Yeah, Dan, what was the black thing that you put the psoas tendon on?
So I took the container for
Oh,
the
you cut
pork
it. Okay,
chops,
got
and
it.
I literally just cut a piece out.
Got it.
And what ends up happening is that this ridge right here turns into a pretty good AIS. Now I'm
That's
sure there's a fancier version of what you could do with maybe like a 3D printer or something. It'd be like super fancy and have that little dip. Um, for example, like this portion to create that dip. I don't find that to be super necessary, but if you wanted to have even higher fidelity to the procedure, you could do that.
That's so cool. Thank you.
When I build the trying to stellate ganglion block, I'm probably going to do a 3D printed C7 to create that model.
And
Hey,
really
Dan.
any oh sorry. Really any piece of like hard you can actually you could use like a like Chinese takeout container or like a kind of a hard paper. I've used that as well to get like a slightly sharper angle. If you wanted to, you know, play around with different materials. But yeah, the foam is nice, and then the takeout container is actually harder, so kind of like gives it a little bit more of a harder feel, like it's bone when you hit it.
Yeah.
Hey,
So
there's a
that those
question.
plastics I think are really good for this type of thing. So
There's a
again,
question, Dan. There's a question, Dan. I'm sorry. I'm
yeah,
sorry.
go ahead.
There's a question from Walid. So he says he's asking about refrigeration and does it improve the model?
So it improves the experience with the model, I would say, because as it obviously gets warm, it's it's going to smell, it's going to start decomposing and all that sort of stuff. So the longer you can prevent that from happening, the better. I've done at most 4 freeze thaw cycles of these, and they really turn into mush around that 4th time. So I really don't recommend putting it through those. Though if you rapidly freeze it after an event, um, that can work. But again, remember that the thawing process takes 4 or 5 hours for a lot of these. And so if you're going to freeze them, that's fine. But once you do that first thaw, they've already been out for 4 hours. And so I find that there's really, for a really positive experience, kind of a one-time deal. But I have done it multiple times. Okay, other questions?
Hey, Dan, I have one more question.
Yeah.
So you've done this now numerous times. How long after you figured out the process do you think somebody new would take to build just one model, like just say a fascial Yaka model or a Peng model?
I think with the good instruction, hopefully this video will be that. maybe 10 minutes. I'm trying to build these more and more with less cutting and just selective cuts of meat from the store so that we don't have to cut things up anymore. So I'm trying to kind of write that part out of this. Now, the serratus block does require, I think, multiple cuts because of the scalenes, but a lot of these bigger models like the Peng and the fascia iliaca um, really couldn't be done with one big chunk of like basically pork chop.
So,
So
so under
yeah,
30 minutes.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
and what would be the cost of an individual model? I know, yeah, I know it's difficult because you're buying large pieces, but approximately, it doesn't have to be exact.
I think when we ran the numbers for the Judy, do you remember the article for like the pocket model? It was like $8 or something like that for a few of them for like if we averaged all the costs.
Yeah, I think the thing is once you buy the yarn and the straws, which they come in bulk, then it's just really the meat. And I guess it depends on which grocery store you go to, but you can get
Yeah.
like a cheap piece of pork loin. I got it for like $2 because it's not like you're gonna eat it, I guess, and we made like 16 models with I think maybe like four or five or six of those. And so the total cost ended up being like $30 or something like that.
Okay. So
But
under $5 to $10 a model. You could
Yeah.
say that? Okay.
Yes.
So if you're talking about 30 minutes and under $5, $10 a model, right? You have now something that is very easily performed by Peter at his shop or me at my shop. That really kind of negates the need for very expensive purchases. So, I mean, if and is the paper published yet, guys? I don't remember. Is it get it out yet, or is it still in the process?
it's revisions. Well, and
Okay.
then resubmit and then hopefully.
Yeah. And I mean that should scare everybody in the simulation community, especially with all these companies stepping into that space selling $1,000 models. So it really should make them crap their pants and come give you guys a call.
That'd be great. All right, I'm gonna just show real quick how to do the fascial block since this is kind of like one of the workhorses of the current state of things. So again, we just have a big chunk of that pork loin, or I'm sorry, pork chop. We're just gonna put that in. That's gonna serve as our kind of quadriceps muscle. Then we're gonna build our neurovascular bundle. Now, I've done this a bunch of times where I've had yarn in this position, but because the yarn has all these little fibers, it traps air and it inevitably you can't see past it. So, what I've been doing recently is that I'll take a piece of the skin from a chicken thigh and I'll cut it off and just kind of mush it up and fold it a little bit to I'll be cleaning the living daylights out of all this stuff. Don't worry. And I'll put it as that third piece, the femoral nerve right there. Again, when you make these, putting a little bit of gel at each layer will help to eliminate those air pockets that you might run into. Now, one of the key elements and key learning objectives of this model is the idea that the the fluid has to track in the proper fascial plane, and that fascial plane goes under the vessels. So, to create that, we're actually going to tuck the fascia or this fascial kind of mock underneath the vessels here. So again, this is just a like a skewer to help just kind of move things around. And now we have your vein, artery, and then nerve. And then we have our fascial plane of the fascia iliaca here. And now I chose a piece of boneless pork rib that had a fascial plane going through the middle. This is going to act as the fascial lata, so that when I put this on top, smooth that out, we should have. Let's take a look. All right, so there's your vein and artery, and you have the kind of like the nerve mush over here, and you have your fascial plane of the fascia iliaca and the fascia lata up here. So if I go ahead and try to do my injection, let's see how that goes. All right, so I don't love to get super close to my nerve. I like to kind of stay a little far away. All right, so I'm gonna go through a little bit. I'm gonna give some juice. There's a good fascial separation there. And let's make sure that's going in the right direction. All right, there we go. So you can see how it's going underneath the vessel on that left side there, which achieves the objective. Careful about injecting air, obviously. So now I've finished the syringe. You saw that air pocket go under, which again, I find to be useful for teaching that when you're actually doing this, you're really going to make sure that the syringe and the needle are empty of air. And so all those little nuances of this procedure become factors of performing it on the simulated model, which I find to be very, very beneficial. All right, questions about the fascia iliaca block?
Hey, Judy,
Cool.
can I ask a question about the meat glue? Just because I know you've talked about it when we've built these models, we're Phoenix or whatever. The meat glue you like because it acts like the fascial plane, but since Dan put a fascial piece on there, you don't need it anymore.
Right, yeah, especially like the chicken skin layer, or you could select meat that already has a fascial plane. And then the container just keeps it all together. Before it was what I was doing was just slabs of meat. And you can imagine when we were trying to do the inner scaling brachial plexus, we had a pork loin that we cut in half and then put three straws in it. And then we're like, how do we get the meat to like kind of stay and fold over the straws? So the meat glue was kind of helping to bind it. But if you have a container, it kind of holds it all together. And then it's nice because once you inject fluid in the container, it kind of leaks out and kind of resets a little bit for the next learner.
Great.
All right, so this next model, this will probably be the last one, unless we want to do a transgluteal sciatic and see if it works. So these are all pieces of a pork loin. And so all I did was cut them in a transverse process to create three kind of scalene-like entities. And then I used sponge to represent lung underneath. So sponge does a great job of representing lung. Now, between two of the scalenes, I created three straws. Now they're smaller than the boba straws, obviously, but these three straws have been filled with gel, and then they're lined up inside another piece of that chicken's. This piece of fascia was actually from the pork loin, and it was nice and straight, so I just cut it. Again, if you don't have access to that, or you don't have that with your particular um, purchase, you can use the chicken skin, or you can use a piece of silicone baking mat, which is super cheap. The only trouble with this is that it does look it's very perfect. It's super linear and it creates two little layers, but you can see through it on ultrasound. So I used to use that, but I found that it was just too synthetic and not realistic enough. And just using these other pieces was cheaper and easier. Okay, so let's tuck this guy in between our two scalene muscles here. And then we're going to put the whole thing back in the box. So here's my box. So here's the sponge. It's going to act as lung. Now this curve does help me kind of create that angle that I need for the scaling, because usually the scalings are not going to be perfectly straight across. So I'm trying to create a little bit of that angle because of that. And it's usually better that the cuts are actually a little too thick, whereas if they're too thin, one of the issues you might run into is that you can't fully get contact because there's this space that happens in here. So that's why I make them a little bit on the larger side. All right, let's see what we got from this guy. So you guys can kind of see there. Here's my three. My stoplight is over here. I'll make it a little bit brighter there. There's my fascial plane. Now, with this, because we wrapped it in a fascial plane with that skin, it becomes much more obvious when you're in the correct location versus not. So I need to find my needle. Guys, if you blame me for 1 minute, I need to find my. So why don't we just ask that? There we go. Okay. So, all right. Obviously, this is a much more obese patient than you are probably typically used to for this particular procedure. But so here's the initial injection. All right, so it's going into some kind of fascial plane, but I don't think it's the right one. There we go. All right, so now you can see that there's a fascial opening actually adjacent to the straws versus when I was outside of the straws. So again, that differentiation of being in the right fascial plane can be very important. And here's another example of what a intramuscular injection would look like. That you're just inside those fibers.
So Dan, what I really
Yeah.
like about this is Arun again, I'm sorry. What I really like about this is that I can find, I'm sure, 10 things I'd want better, like perfection.
Mhm.
But I think that the perfection would reduce the ability for somebody to actually do this and would
Yeah.
actually, so like, that 80-20 phenomenon, like everybody wants perfection, but yet they spend the last 4 months and so much effort and a cost to make it perfect. This
Yep.
is exactly what I want for a new learner. And then once I'm training a third year resident who's done a couple of these, then I can be like, hey, I want you to stay away from the intraneural injection. I want to look at this fascial plane. But that initial needle visualization, getting to the spot, feeling the push, that's all you really need. And I think that the problem is the companies that make this products are built by engineers who think in a different way than we do. And I
Yeah.
think mindset that you're teaching, I think, is really relevant for cheap cost, ease of use, and good enough.
Yeah. And it hits all the check marks of the things you actually want to teach. I
But
don't
but
need it to look perfect.
but I think that what the problem is, the industry is looking for perfection, and
Yeah.
what they're doing is they're wasting their resources trying to make perfect when we already have good enough,
Yeah.
and looking at it, like you said, in a layer technique.
Yeah. All right, so I'm going to give it a quick go to see if this can mimic a transgluteal sciatic. Now, to mimic bones, I find that wood does a great job, and the easiest way to work with wood is actually charcoal. So charcoal does great at being a manipulable or changeable version of bone. So let's see if we can try and build ourselves a quick transgluteal sciatic. So in this particular chunk, we're going to do a little bit of manipulation here. I'm going to break that open a bit right there. And then we're going to come in. Looks like we got to cut this actually. So I'm just going to cut this over here. And then here's my other bone for my either greater troch or my ischial tuberosity. So what I'm doing over here right now is I'm just going to cut into this space over here. And that will allow me to put the bone into that little section. Cutting pieces or slivers into the model is a really great way to kind of get things to sit in the proper way that you want them to sit. So now we have a bone, and a fascial plane in between, which is kind of the main goal of the transgluteal sciatic. Again, trying to be very mindful of simplicity. All right, let's see how we look here. Now, again, you saw that took maybe what, 2 minutes? And let's see what we got on the other side. All right, so for on our side, we have one bone over there. We got our other bone over there. You got a fascia in between. So for the most part, we achieved our objective. Again, like Arun said, it's not perfect. It doesn't need to be. But let's see if I can just do a fascial separation. Now, notice how with my current model, I'm hitting the side here. And one of the things that we'll often do is just snip this part off and cut them to size so that you're not running into these walls and things. Just gonna cut a little more. Sorry for the little trail camness there. All right. So you can see now on the screen, there's my needle right there. Here's my fascial plane. Let's see what happens if there we go. All right, so you can see again, it's a lot cleaner and it's a lot easier to see that fascial plane change with these models compared to, either those blue phantoms or those other models that might be out there. Questions about this one? Your meat is not thick enough to fill up the box. You can use the sponge underneath to raise. Yes. So in a few of our models, you're seeing that we use that sponge to create a raised portion to meet the top, or we cut the top off to create the appropriate size. And remember that you can use the videos and the reference videos to figure out how many centimeters this should be and create the block the way you want to. So we've done the pang, we've done transgluteal sciatic, we've done fascia iliaca, and interscaping. Questions from people?
And I just wanted to point out, look at how just compact and portable these boxes are. You could fit them in a little lunch cooler, like a lunch bag, put like and then just bring it to like a department meeting, and this just makes it easy for you to have repeated practicing sessions to keep people, having this skill set just refreshed longitudinally. And I think that is going to increase people's comfort and, eventually, encourage people to perform blocks. And it's not like it's going to take 6 hours of making agar gel and, buying like a candy thermometer and all of that. It's pretty nice. You can make a whole bunch, put it in the fridge. You can even like freeze it and then maybe before your meeting, take it out, thaw it the day before.
Morning, everyone. Thank you again. This is incredible. I'm Waleed. I'm a global medicine and ultrasound fellow at Loma Linda, and I was just wondering if you guys had any like special considerations if I wanted to implement some of these nerve block models in a like a low middle income country.
Do it. I think it'll
Yeah,
go
I
the
think
easiest.
sorry about the.
No, go, Dan.
I think you just have to be respective of what they have, like goat meat versus pork versus beef versus whatever they have around. The costs are usually vastly different. Like when I did this in Ethiopia, I had to use a beef loin. They cost me like $30. But like here, that would be like 120 or $150, and they were ecstatic. To me, it was like, well, I mean, I don't usually use filet mignon to do this, nor would I ever want to, but it was what was available at the time. Goat meat is a little interesting in that there's a lot of bony elements, and there's not a lot of like it's hard to get those big chunks of the size that you need, um, which often is more available, I think. So, just kind of play around with what you have around you and see where it goes. Chicken is always, available. And like, to be honest, when you're first running these, if you're looking at the screen here, the chicken thigh does all the things. Like it gives you bones, it gives you fascial planes, it gives you muscle tissue. It's a great place to start. Kat Vlasica told me a year ago or two that like that's really the workhorse of meat-based simulation is the chicken thigh because it does everything. You can practice the erector spinae, you can practice the serratus anterior, you can practice a lot of different things and just get that needle viz and those basic skills under your belt. So I'll just show you real quick what that looks like, but other people can ask further questions.
Sorry, as a follow-up, do you recommend like making the plastic containers before you go to whatever country that you choose, or can you make them on site?
I would say um, these can travel for maybe 4 to 8 hours, and that's about it. they really start to thaw at that point. And if you're going to be on a 16-hour flight and you can't guarantee refrigeration for 20 or 30 hours, not a great plan. I
I
think
think
bring your supplies with you, buy the meat there. That also save you on transport costs, and then build it there a day or two ahead of time, and then bring it to your process. Plus, one of the other things is like if you have a frozen model the morning of your event, that 4 to 5 hours is really going to cost you, and it is not pretty when you have to thaw these in fluid. Like when you have to thaw them in warm water, it is terrible. Do
the
not do
ability to
that.
take meat overseas is going to be very limited. You're not going to be able to take meat. They're not going to let you take it. There's no way. If you carry meat into this country, you will be confiscated, and they will take all your shit and throw it away. Yeah, it's hard enough. I've been traveling, and you can't take nuts in some countries. So I would definitely not take meat to another country.
I think I was
I would,
more asking about like the actual plastic in and of itself.
Yeah, it should be fine. But like, so here's an example of just the chicken thigh, and you can see that that fascial separation is beautiful. All right, and this is what I usually teach my initial block training on the same day that I do my IV training, because my IV training is also mostly based on um, chicken thighs as well, which I was just going to show everybody real quick. How much time do we have left?
I think we're
We
done.
went over already. Okay, so I'll just be real quick about this. So I already made the it's kind of string balloon. This is for an IV simulator. This is not a nerve block simulator, but I filled this with water with a syringe to make sure there's no air anywhere in this system. I'm going to take my skewer on the blunt end, take some gel, and then I'm going to skewer through the kind of thick part of the chicken thigh, bring that through. I'm going to put the blunt end back through this portion, and again through here, and then bam, that's it. All right, so now that you have these two pieces here, you can, with your situation, you can actually now see, sorry, there we go. So let's pretend I'm doing an IV now. You can now actually look at yourself doing an out of plane technique IV in this simulator. Okay, so pretty helpful little piece of equipment there. That's what I use the majority of the time for the thing I run the most is IV for the nurses, students, residents. You know how everybody wants it, but no one can can actually give you money for it. So um, the chicken thigh is really just super valuable. If you're going to start anywhere, start with the chicken thigh. Let them train on that with needle placement, needle visualization, and then go from there.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Yep. Other thoughts? Well, I really appreciate everyone's time. We are over by 15 minutes, so thank you very much for your patience. We look forward to future conversations. We look forward to helping anyone who wants to build more of these types of models. If you have ideas about blocks we haven't thought of, that would be great. I still haven't fully cracked the nut of the popliteal sciatic block with the two pieces. So Judy, maybe you can help me out with that. Otherwise, open to everybody's feedback, and I guess we'll see you next week. Have a good one, guys.
Thank you both.
Thank
Awesome.
you.
Thank you so
Thanks.
much,
Thank
guys.
you.